let's see. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have, tablets. You couldn't go to the talk and play WoW. Pretty much your choice when you were done working or not on guard duty was read a book, sleep, play spades, or BS. And you could only lie about pussy for so long. So the rule was you weren't allowed to call bullshit. As long as the story hung together and was entertaining, you weren't allowed to call bullshit. And eventually that leads to ghost stories. You don't realize it, but soldiers are fucking superstitious. I mean, and everybody had ghost stories. I mean, everybody did. Because, a lot of us country boys, and even people who lived in the city had ghost stories. There was always, these stories about like how Madigan Army Hospital, the original one, not the modern one, but the old one, was haunted as fuck. Anybody who'd ever spent like overnight there would talk about how you could hear footsteps moving up and down the hallway and there'd be nothing there. You'd see a nurse come in and she'd look you over and then leave. And when the next nurse came in, you noticed she had a different style of uniform. That nurse might have been wearing a candy striper uniform from like the 50s. And Madigan Army Hospital, they finally went, oh, we're going to build a new modern hospital because reasons. And nobody said shit. And, they destroyed the building because everybody knew across the entire army at the time that Madigan Army Hospital was fucking haunted. I can't remember if it's Fort Riley, Fort Carson. There was always claims the parade ground was haunted. Supposedly, you'd see old cavalry troops out there, guys from the Indian Wars. Then, of course, there was always the locomotive out on your grandma's property. There's the ghostly locomotive that comes whipping through and would crash. Because a lot of people don't realize, back in the day, they drove trains like fucking maniacs. I mean, back when when they initially made the Transcontinental Railroad, they drove trains like they were crazy people. How fast could you make it from one place to another was a big deal. You got to figure these guys died horrible deaths because that thing would crash and they'd get covered in fucking steam. So, you had the haunted trains. But everybody had ghost stories. Everybody knew of somebody, or they knew of a guy who knew of a guy, or they knew of a guy who knew of a guy. And it would go around. Sometimes it wasn't even when you were deployed or out in the field. Sometimes it'd be at the back of the NCO club at 2 a.m. Tired of fucking BSing about pussies. So let's talk about creepy shit. And then you'd walk back to the barracks drunk as fuck. You're so drunk you have to lean on each other because you're technically falling down. And you can sit in the room and drink beer and tell ghost stories. You'd hear of anybody from New Jersey going to tell you about Jersey Devil. And of course, I think it's Jersey that has Spring-Heeled Jack. Guys from New York would tell you these creepy stories about haunted apartment buildings. Mm-hmm. Guys from LA would talk about there's hidden places under LA that were, San Francisco. Under San Francisco and under Seattle, there's parts of the old city that you can get into. And those are haunted. And then you've got guys like me from the Pacific Northwest. We've got our stories about, shit's haunted. So you'd sit around and you'd tell these fucking stories. Then you'd bring up what everybody had seen. And I mean, there's an old story. I mean, sometimes they have punchlines. Sometimes they have a really good punchline. I knew a guy who was involved in a live fire incident. Basically, 3 people got killed. And he was telling us about it when he got to the unit. And after the first month in the unit, he comes into my room and he goes, "Have a beer?" I'm like, "Yeah." So I'm like, "What's up?" He goes, "So I was in that incident, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I remember you telling us about it." He goes, "I think I'm being haunted." And I'm like, "Why?" He goes, "The ghost of one of the guys will walk by me and say hi. Sometimes he's in the chow hall and wave to me. I've seen him in formation and shit." I'm like, "Damn, that's fucked up." And we're sitting there, he's telling me about it. I feel guilty enough. I'm seeing this guy where I turn around. I'm thinking, do I go to the church? Do I go to mental health? What? And I was like, we got a lot of people claim to be able to see ghosts. Let me go get a buddy of mine. His family's from Trinidad. So, he's big into the spiritualism. He comes in, we're sitting there. He's like, he describes the guy. It's not a big help. 6 foot tall, blonde, weighs about 185, blue eyes. Yeah, that's a huge fucking help. Thanks, genius. And I'm like, well, you got to give something more to go on, man, because that's like half the dudes in the unit. "Oh, well, his name is Phillips." You're like, "His name's Phillips." "Yeah, his name's Phillips." I'm like, "Hang on." I go down and knock on the door and say, "Hey, come on with me." He's like, "Come on." We go into my room and the guy goes, "The ghost is standing right next to you." And I went, "Phillips, didn't you have a twin brother got killed in a training accident last year?" He's like, "Yeah." Dude had no idea that the guy that was killed with him, twin brother, was in our unit. So he'd been freaking out for months thinking, "Oh my God, I'm being haunted." And once he got the story, he's like, "This is the greatest thing to ever happen." Because the look on his face when Phillips walks in next to me, he's like, "Fuck." It's a great ghost story because it's got the good punchline.